As you probably know, not much is happening on the camera market right now. So one day, after looking at some older Superzoom, thought popped in my head it would be fun to do ultimate comparison of all of them from every brand, to see which one comes out with the best quality and to really take this in-depth look at the achievements made in this unique segment so far. Obviously, there were some limitations, such as this YouTube video format itself. I had to narrow it down a bit, focusing on last available long-range super zoom cameras from almost every possible major brand, within a range of 50x to 83x optical zoom. I didn't include 1-inch sensor cameras with smaller reach or more serious Nikon Coolpix P1100 on purpose, because those belong to a bit different categories in my opinion. As a result, I managed to collect 6 major super zooms: Nikon Coolpix P950 with 83x optical zoom announced in 2020, Panasonic Lumix FZ82 with 60x lens introduced in 2017, revised in 2024, 2018 Canon SX70 HS 65x zoom, 2014 Olympus Stylus SP100EE with 50x zoom, 2014 Fujifilm Finepix S1 with 50x zoom, finally the Sony HX350 with 50x zoom, announced in 2016. Without further ado, let's briefly look at all of them, and let me say a few words about the design and build quality first. When it comes to the appearance, I personally dig the Sony HX350. Its body has a lot of complex curvatures, small panel gaps, and unusual details such as the microphone piece, blue-size logo on the lens, smooth zoom ring, or their fancy technologies labeled on the body. Even the power button looks the nicest to me. As for the materials, lens housing is made from metal, and as you can see, body, despite a bit plasticky, has a really nice texture to it. On the flip side, despite its Japanese origins, it was made in China. Not far off, albeit a bit more conventional looking, is the Panasonic. It looks coherent and solid, its lens housing is made from metal, but body is plastic and could get extra point if there was some better texture implemented. Thumbs up, however, for USB-C port, though probably required by EU regulations nowadays. Just as the previous one, it was assembled in China. Then we need to price Fujifilm. That one is probably the best put together overall. Very sturdy, no rattles like in some of the others, feels quite nice to the hand thanks to that rubber cortic on the whole body, though as you can imagine it is more prone to scratches because of that. Here I'll also need to emphasize it is the only camera in the comparison that's weather resistant. Thumbs up for that. Interestingly, it was assembled in Indonesia. Likewise the Olympus, which stands out with extra silver color on the top and sharper edges. Whereas I myself prefer Sony curvatures, I admire Olympus' effort to stand out, and it is not a design facade. They even came out with this laser dot side framing feature as a helpful long-range zoom use. Despite being the lightest, I think, build quality is on point. The lens housing is made from metal, partly covered with rubber texture. I will however criticize non-standard port, which required me to use the charger instead of my own micro C lightning power strip setup. Nikon, I will admit, the most far-fetched in the comparison, comes out with the biggest form factor, but obviously you have to pack 83x zoom somehow, somewhere. It really is a giant. I even thought maybe I should instead get smaller, well-known to my viewers, Nikon Coolpix B700, but it was older and not so accessible, so it stayed as it is. The biggest, but also most serious and expensive one in the comparison. It also is well put together, but you could argue for the price looks a bit blunt and could use more sophisticated materials in a few areas. Like many other Nikons, my unit was made in Thailand. Lastly, Canon, the only camera in the comparison made according to its origins in Japan, which deserves huge credit. Contrary to Nikon, it feels like the smallest form factor, which I like. Build quality wise, it's not bad, but plastic feels a bit cheap, actually maybe the cheapest. Lens housing on the other hand is made of metal, and just like in Nikon, protective glass on the screen is also lacking. In terms of ergonomics, I found the overall best grip to be in the Canon, Panasonic and Sony. Though I wouldn't say it's that important, because in such camera you will probably use both hands most of the time. And despite that I don't like Olympus' small and shallow buttons, I would like to point out their big efforts to innovate and do things differently again. Please take a look at how they've purposely angled the zoom control around the shutter button. This is a brilliant idea which allows you comfortably zoom with even one hand. I'm shocked others didn't implement it. It is very useful. Screen-wise, generally all of them cut cost in either articulation, quality or protection. Canon and Panasonic provides with the overall finest quality and resolution. Sony is not far off either, pretty accurate in colors, but black contrast could be better. Nikon's panel is sharp but a bit too warm. Fuji has weird contrast issues, with objects appearing too dark often. By far Olympus has the worst panel with the lowest resolution, and you can easily notice that. Either way, you can't skip Nikon and Canon lack glass protection. On the flip side, thanks to that, they provide with less reflection than Olympus, Sony and especially Fuji. On the other hand, the best of bunch, Panasonic, has fantastic quality LCD, great protective layer on top of that, but with anti-reflective coating, and it is a touchscreen. So generally, we could call it a win if it had articulation. As it is, we can call it a draw with Canon. When it comes to the viewfinder, Nikon and Canon have major advantage with their impressive 2.3 million dot OLED EVFs. Pretty much as good, however, is the Panasonic with its million dot EVF. That sadly cannot be said about all of the others, which provide with low resolution and low magnification. Definitely quite noticeable in real-world use, especially with this type of camera. Briefly browsing through the software, as for the pure responsiveness, playing with menu and changing some options, Canon SX70, Panasonic FZ82 and Olympus SP100 seem the overall fastest. That said, the rest is perfectly usable, although admittedly the slowest Nikon P950 feels at the limit of that sometimes. On the other hand, it has really simple and easy to read layout. But if we would speak more on UI design, Panasonic and Sony definitely put the overall most effort here, leaving all of the rivals behind. Just look for yourself, all the gradients, overlays and pictures assigned to scenes in case of Sony. What I will say, however, is more important in such camera is the operating speed. With this type of camera, you will often catch yourself needing to quickly capture something that can be gone within seconds, birds for example. So autofocus wise, Canon and Panasonic play in totally different league compared to the others, almost instant reaction. Then Fuji and Sony might come close, but still they are slightly behind. Nikon and Olympus are definitely more off, especially the latter. They could on top tweak this lag after pressing the shutter button. Still, all of them are quite usable to be honest, and autofocus itself is only a small part of the story in this equation. For fast operating speed, you will not only need fast focusing system, but even more so, what's often not talked about, instant boot up and responsive zoom. So firstly, I've tested how long each camera needs for a startup. Results? A tie between Canon and Nikon. You have to admit 0.9 second time on both is remarkably good. Next was a bit behind Fuji, coming at 1.5 seconds. Then Panasonic 1.6 seconds, Sony at 1.9 seconds, and the slowest Olympus coming at 2 seconds. But this alone wouldn't give us a full image, so let's move on to the second phase, referring to how quickly each lens zooms from 0 to about 1200 millimeters. The clear winner, once again, Canon SX70 with unbelievable time of 1.8 seconds. Almost as good was Fujifilm Finepix S1, coming at 2 seconds. Not too bad, Panasonic 2.5 seconds and Sony at 2.6 seconds. Sadly, this time Nikon didn't perform as well with the time of 2.9 seconds, which means only one worse was once again the Olympus at 3.2 seconds. So if we would sum up numbers from both measurements and take into the account autofocus systems, Canon wins by huge margin. You have to give it to their engineers. It seems they really grasped this issue, and the SX70 could hold the title of the fastest superzoom in the world. Moving to the most important, image quality, let's start with view landscape to see how each compares in dynamic range, color science and their auto mode. So first one, in the P mode, Sony, Panasonic and Canon looks best to me. Nikon definitely had a problem with exposure control. After switching to auto mode, things are more tamed. Still, highlights and shadows are most well lit in previously mentioned cameras, and no surprise, by default Sony features multi-stacking algorithms, as well as the Panasonic. In this one I actually had to turn on so-called IHDR mode. And I don't know what Canon is doing, but there is definitely some processing magic involved too. Here it was close to sunset, so Sony and Olympus looks to be the most accurate actually. At the same time, don't get me wrong, that difference doesn't seem that crucial, quite of a preference. Finally, something to look at, and actually a bit more difficult scene with the sun up high and the nice castle ruins in Gozdowie. You have to give it to Canon with its blue sky and best definition. Their PowerShot expertise comes out here. Then I would say a draw between Panasonic and Sony, but let's be honest, others are close and keep up quite well. Until we zoom in, there is this, for example, Nikon's tendency to underexpose sometimes. Fuji has nice color science but blows out highlights in the sky. Olympus is a little washed out. Again, the pattern repeats. Sony, Panasonic and Canon looks to be the best in this case. In this one, Sony looks superior to me, with bright grass and a lot of detail on the castle. Not far off is Panasonic. Canon looks a bit washed out and flat actually. Nikon, Olympus and Fuji are quite similar, though looking at those bricks there is not the first time something about the Fuji color science which I'm drawn to. Now I would like to examine the level of detail each sensor and picture processor is capable of, looking at the wide angle at f4 in the crop. You can see it, but right now I'm looking at the screen and the box itself in real life, focusing on those platter cushions illustration, and without a doubt first place belongs to Sony, then Canon and then Nikon. All of the others couldn't provide the same real-to-life detail if you look closely. But that was only part of the equation. Let's see how well their lenses can match to the sensor potential. On the side note, in this one, color-wise, Canon, Fuji and Sony looks to be the most alive. But anyway, let's get back to the topic and see the performance at 1200mm, going into the crop on those bricks and the sign. Without a doubt, Nikon comes out with the most amount of detail, almost on par. Perhaps it's a bit of sharpening difference as well is the Canon SX70, then Sony HX350 and maybe Fuji S1. Next, let's do the same on this statue, very well lit, so we don't have to worry about shutter speed. The results are the same, Fuji is getting close again. The biggest difference between Canon and the other winners appear to be in the sharpening algorithm. By default, Canon is very tame, only one that focuses to preserve more natural, flat-looking detail it seems. And who doesn't like pumpkins? Let's go into the magnification. At this point, we think we can all agree there is surprisingly big difference in the lens quality and sharpness between all of those cameras. Nikon, Sony and Canon clearly win, although you can notice Fuji S1 missed focus on the grass in this case. All in all, I would say Nikon has the leading quality all-around glass in the comparison. Second place I think belongs to Canon and Sony. Fuji is not too shabby as well, but Panasonic and Olympus could have been better at max or near maximum zoom, because as you see now in this flower picture when I was using all of the reach, the difference is not that significant. The same goes here for this statue. What's also important to know is how much further Canon 60x and Nikon 83x zoom can reach in comparison to others with 50x zoom. As you can see, the bridge is not that far off, and when I zoom in fully on all of cameras, the extra reach isn't that useful really. Generally, farther the object is, the more visible the difference will become. And that is exactly the case with this moonshot. It depends on what you plan to shoot. I can only speak for myself. 50x zoom is kind of crazy enough, and as of now, I would rather have a sweet spot 50x or 65x zoom, but with more portability, more compact size body or faster operating speed. Moving on to the low light performance, let's start with the proper ISO test. So at ISO 400, all of cameras can hold up quite decent. At ISO 800, you will start to notice difference in noise cleaning algorithms. Nikon appears to have the most amount of detail. Next, I would say Panasonic and Sony, which has a little bit more aggressive processing, but quite good results in the end. You can see that even more clearly at ISO 1600, Nikon tends to look the best, then Panasonic and Sony. If you look at the text, it is in fact quite blurry and messy on the Canon, Olympus and Fuji. Not that I recommend, but let's switch to ISO 3200. For a brief moment, take a look at the red text on top. Nikon wins. As for the low light performance in auto mode, just for fun, it's a bit more difficult to judge and objectively compare, since all of them will use different shutter speed, but still, I've managed to capture all of those shots you see totally handheld, so for a fact you can somewhat count on their stabilization, it seems. To my surprise, Fuji, Nikon and Sony appears to be the best. Panasonic has a bit too much color noise, despite that I've turned on its so-called iHandheld night shot mode. A bit misleading, I must admit. I've expected more of a smartphone level night mode, but actually neither of them delivered that. Sadly, even the latest products seem to have missed on such technological advancements. Anyway, many of you will not take stills but rather record, so let's move to the video quality, starting off with the walking test. Please just take a look for yourself on stabilization and overall looks and maxed out settings on each camera. Most importantly, only Nikon, Canon and Panasonic provide with 4K resolution, rest of them is unfortunately limited to 1080p. To clarify, I will mention most cameras will provide with stabilization advantages in Full HD because it requires less processing power than UHD. And looking at the Sony footage, it definitely has the best 1080p video quality, perhaps even the most cinematic, I mean the color science and stabilization. You can't, however, overlook 4K benefits in the level of detail, so focusing on that, I'm quite disappointed with the Canon, uses only the center of the sensor to capture 4K. This way it comes out with this huge crop factor, as you will see in a moment when I switch to Nikon. Which, on the other hand, is not perfect either if we speak about the level of detail. It perhaps is slightly worse than Canon. Panasonic appears to have the best 4K quality out of all. To sum up, if you solely look for the best optics and sensor pairing, It can't get any better than Nikon. And I mean not only the Coolpix P950, but also a bit older and smaller like the Coolpix B700. In the past I've compared that one with the Sony HX400, so check out that if you're interested. But I would still definitely consider Canon SX70 or Sony HX350. Both of them feature solid lenses and sensor that are not that far off from Nikon. You will, however, notice multiple, non-obvious, often not talked about, but actually just as important aspects, such as the instant operating speed and fast autofocus. Not to mention SX70 was built in Japan. Sony, on the other hand, convinces with its superb, the most Apple-like build and design, and without a doubt one of the best image processor and sensor. Also, I should give a proper credit to the Fujifilm Finepix S1 for having the best build quality, quite fast operating speed similar to Canon, and not too shabby lens and sensor pairing. Not to mention it is the only one weather resistant in this battle. As for Olympus and Panasonic, I am a little bit disappointed by their quality in the zoom, mostly at or near maximum focal length range. That said, I can't skip the fact Panasonic FZ82 kind of makes up for it by shooting the most detailed 4K video out of all. Olympus SP100, despite being on the last place in the comparison, still has to be mentioned for their clever thinking, this dot sight technology, brilliantly angled zoom control and portability. I just wish optic and sensor performance would be more on par. So as you can see, despite having this clearly constructed ranking, you can still underline unique things that are exceptionally good to each one of those cameras. And just as a fun hypothetical based on this comparison, we could easily describe the ideal super zoom camera. So what it would look is, if you ask me, sharp lens of the Nikon, processing and sensor taken from Sony, Canon startup lens extension and autofocus speed, Fujifilm build quality, Sony power button and overall aesthetics, Olympus zoom control, user interface ideally mix of Sony and Panasonic, video quality, Panasonic level of detail, Sony color science and stabilization. And so is the recipe for super zoom success ready. It would be a dream to see such camera reviving really the whole industry, but will that ever happen judging by the current state of the market? That is a thought for another video. If you like this comparison, please share your opinions in the comments. Which camera would you pick as a winner? Perhaps share your ranking, and also let me know if I should review, I think, the only two super zoom left that are not included in this video, Samsung and Kodak, in the near future. That is all for today. Thank you very much for watching and see you in the next one.